All right. Welcome everyone to the Grapevine Wellness Show. I see people logging in. Great. Computers syncing up, satellites syncing up. Come on in. Make yourselves at home. I'm your host, Jolyn Armstrong, and I'm so glad you're here this evening. For those of you who are new here and maybe we don't know each other yet, I'll tell you a little bit about me. I am a certified trauma recovery coach, grief recovery specialist, and a certified somatic embodiment specialist. I provide help for those struggling with anxiety, depression, grief, trauma, PTSD. And I use a various modalities to help folks calm their nervous system as they are struggling through life experiences and things that we all tend to go through, right? If you or someone you know is suffering with any of these things, or if you're interested in living a more intentional or fulfilling life and you really aren't sure what's holding you back from that, please do reach out. As always, I offer those attending this show live a complimentary session with me to determine if coaching is right for you or if working with me is a good fit as well. So, no pressure. We just get together and have a discovery or information session and see how we work together. You can schedule that with me by emailing me at connect@grapevineinnerwellness.com or call me 916-415-8619 to get that scheduled. All right. A little bit about this show. Our mission on this show is just to bring meaningful conversations that offer hope and support, practical tools for those navigating life's challenges. We love to offer a space for those who take care of specifically the Reno and Tahoe community here to share what they do and how they care for the mental, emotional, and or physical wellness of our community. And today's episode is a really important one. It's one that's close to my heart for sure, this topic. Today we have a truly insightful conversation ahead of us. Joining me is Emily Allina, a functional and integrative medicine practitioner and the owner of High Sierra Restorative Health. Emily brings a wealth of experience as a family nurse practitioner with a deep passion for uncovering the hidden physical causes behind mental health struggles like anxiety and depression. From hormonal imbalances to nutritional deficiencies, Emily's approach highlights the powerful connection between physical health and emotional well-being, just something that's so close to my heart for sure. She's here to share why optimizing your body's health is a critical step towards achieving mental clarity and balance. So I am just really honored and excited to introduce Emily to our listeners. Emily, thank you so much for being here today and for bringing your expertise to our listeners.
Hi, Jolene. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. So glad you're here. Well, I really would love to start with just kind of your background. Let's start with your journey. What inspired you to pursue a career in functional and integrative medicine, and yeah, your early years maybe. Tell us a little bit about you.
Well, if we go to my early years, I first began in healthcare as a nurse. I went to Indiana University, got my bachelor's degree in nursing, and worked in various fields of nursing, mostly in the hospital, until I went back in 2008 and started to pursue my nurse practitioner degree, my master's degree, which I completed in 2011. And to be honest, most of my initial nurse practitioner experience was in the emergency department, and where I still continue to work very part-time. I moonlight occasionally. But during my career over the last several years, I had many jobs as a nurse practitioner, including working in family medicine, sports medicine, as well as with a psychiatrist for a couple of years, helping do medication management for patients with psychiatric issues in an outpatient setting. So I have kind of a wide variety. Most recently, I opened my own practice in 2021 here up at Tahoe in Incline Village. And now I primarily treat individuals from a I guess you would say that my area of expertise now would be endocrinology or the hormone system. A lot of people are familiar with hormone replacement therapy, and that is part of what I do. But I also treat people with thyroid disorders, cortisol abnormalities, nutrient deficiencies. I also do, I guess, dabble a little bit in family medicine. Many of my patients end up seeing me for other issues, and I do have an urgent care branch of the practice just because I'm in a small town and that's an area of expertise of mine. So I'm able to provide those services to the community. So kind of a holistic approach to treatment still. But I transitioned from the hospital during COVID to my own practice and I love it. It's been great.
Fantastic. Oh, that's good. What a benefit to that community, that you're there and supporting them in this way. I just love that so much. I remember you telling a story earlier about a moment in your earlier years at camp. Do you remember that story when you nursed your friend?
I think it was you or your husband asked me when the first experience I remember taking care of somebody. And I do remember, I think this is the first one I can remember, and my memory's not that great these days. But my first memory is at Girl Scout camp. I was 6 years old. There were four of us in a tent, and I went with some friends from my neighborhood, and one of them got really sick. And I remember helping take care of her, helping the counselors take care of her. And so that's kind of my first experience with caregiving that I remember. I'm sure my family may have other memories of earlier or later, but that was really the first one that I can pinpoint where I was enjoying helping take care. I'm sure I was probably just really in the way, but I thought I was helping.
It was
So
in your, it's like in your, to your bones, right? From the time you were a little girl, like I want to help people feel better. Yeah, I love that. I love that story. I remember, yeah, it might have been Jim that asked you that. Jim and I do a lot together, but yeah. So let's talk about your shift from you talk a lot about the um your career as an RN and your master's degree. Let's talk about this shift from that kind of traditional medicine into functional medicine. What you made this shift, but let's talk about your mindset around that. What made you want to make that shift? Yeah, what drew you to that?
well, to be perfectly honest, it was a combination of really establishing a relationship with my patients, being able to take care of them and follow them through their healthcare journey. So when you work in the ER, which is predominantly my experience, you have a lot of what people call single serving interactions. And it's great, it's helpful. I make a difference in people's lives for the most part. You can help solve problems. It's a lot of problem solving, diagnosing, and then you hand that person off to the next person then that continues the treatment, gets to see what their outcomes are, and you move on to the next person. And so while it's intellectually stimulating and there's a lot of mental gymnastics and you get to do a lot of procedures and that can be fun, you don't ever have a lot of follow up or follow through or closure with people to know if what you did really truly helped them. You're also seeing them for a single episodic issue, which can be fun because it can make things easy because people are very complicated. But at the same time, you're never really in a position to give them guidance on how to improve their situation. So a lot of times people come into you and they have many multiple medical issues and you don't really ever get to address those or help them navigate or troubleshoot before it becomes an ER situation. And then in that moment in the emergency department or urgent care, it's not really a time when people are really open to like, hey, let's sit down and talk about your lifestyle and let's talk about exercise and diet and your hormones, because people mostly just want to get out of there because they've been waiting and they have an issue and it's not the time or the place to do that. And so there's not a lot of teaching, unfortunately, that goes on. I mean, you can try, but it doesn't really sink in for people in those moments. And so, yeah, so that's the shift. The fun part now is that I get to really establish a relationship with my patients, and we get to work on problem solving together. And there's still some complicated things for the intellectual gymnastics, but then at the same time, we get to look at the whole person, and we get to actually start addressing things before they become problems instead of waiting for them to be a problem and then either try and backtrack or band-aid or even before it gets to the point where it's beyond repair.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. You saw you wanted more connection with people and that ability to work through more long term. Love it. Love it. Yeah. Which really is necessary when we're looking at that kind of connection between physical and mental health, right? And um, as opposed to an accident that leads a person to an ER, right? Or something like that, right? So, but let's talk about that a little bit, kind of that overlooked connection, or at least until more recently, I think that overlooked connection between physical and mental health. Um, Maybe we can talk about how those things are interrelated, things like hormones and diet. Let's share some factors that are have been to this point overlooked for the most part.
Well, I think the biggest issue in the way that people traditionally approach taking care of individuals is very siloed.
Mhm.
So often people go to school, they study, they learn a little bit about everything, but then they specialize in an area of medicine or nursing or whatever field that they are becoming experts in. And that's really the only silo that they operate out of. And so often they become experts in disease processes or complex issues that are just related to, for instance, the cardiovascular system or bones or dermatology. But the reality is we are a very complex system. We're an organism, and everything in our body that is it's a functioning part of a machine, and everything affects everything. So when you start to look at one thing in the absence of investigating other areas of the body, you often are only getting a very small picture of what's going on, or addressing a very small piece of the puzzle. And so if you think of that from a mental health perspective, if you go to a psychiatrist or a psychologist, a psychologist is going to, or a therapist is, tell me about your childhood, or tell me about the issue, and you're going to talk about feelings. And then you go to a psychiatrist and they're going to say, well, let's try these medications usually. I mean, there are some great psychiatrists that do alternative or complementary modalities, but for the most part, a big part of mental health treatment involves some sort of pharmaceutical therapy generally. And that's great. I mean, for certain mental illness, that is 100% appropriate, or at least it's very necessary part of the treatment plan. But for a lot of people, they go to see these individuals and they're dealing with anxiety or depression, and nobody has said, like, well, what are you eating? What are you doing for exercise? Tell me, have you had any blood work recently? Tell me about your aches and pains. Are you gaining weight? Tell me about your sleep. I mean, I would say that in mental health arenas, sleep has become more of a recognized problem or contributing factor to issues with mental health. Poor sleep has a lot of negative consequences, right? But that wasn't always something that was discussed. I would say probably in the last 5 to 10 years, it's really come to the forefront of part of a treatment plan for individuals. But in general, it's very much like, oh, you're anxious. Let's give you this medication and let's have you talk about why you're anxious. But there's no like, well, have we checked to see if your thyroid is functioning okay? Do you have hyperthyroidism? Is your heart rate fast? I mean, in the psychiatrist office I work in, there wasn't even a stethoscope or a blood pressure cuff, or there was no even just, let's do an exam. Unfortunately, if you pick any specialty, often it's neglects other aspects of the body, and the mind and the body are very interconnected. As we can see, thoughts can chronic negative thoughts can lead to stress, which leads to cortisol imbalance, which then stresses the thyroid. So it's a common cascade effect or domino effect, if you will, and vice versa. People that are always chronically ill, have aches and pains, aren't sleeping, they start to suffer mental health consequences of that. They get anxious that they're always depressed because they're not sleeping, or they're depressed because they're always feeling anxious, or it's becomes this vicious cycle. But not nobody, up until recently, people weren't really looking at the whole picture and saying, is there really an organic cause for what is potentially going on? Everybody jumps to the, oh, I've had childhood trauma, or, oh, I've had I had a breakup, or I'm grieving, which are all very valid issues. However, a lot of people have breakups, or a lot of people have childhood trauma, and that doesn't always lead them to have such significant mental health challenges. And so you always want to dig deeper and say, is there something else that is causing this person to have dysregulation of mood, dysregulation of function, inability to cope with certain things? And I feel like that's a very important part, because if you can eliminate any physical, or what we would call like organic issues, then that makes it that much easier to treat, or at least that in itself is a data point. You've eliminated some sort of organic cause that might be contributing to an issue like heavy metal, heavy metal poisoning, or heavy metal issues, or toxicity, chemical exposure. All that has an effect on mood and cognition. And it's just as important as dealing with any external influences that might be occurring.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I love that. It really is a puzzle, right? A big puzzle with all of the physical and emotional and mental pieces at play here.
Yeah.
Are you, and I'm hearing a little bit that you're maybe in your practice seeing a shift from the siloing a little bit to maybe more people paying attention, people being practitioners in general, paying attention to this kind of play between our physical and mental health, or how, I don't know, what are your thoughts there? What are you seeing?
I mean, I would like to say yes, but that's because of the people that I interface with, and the
Yeah.
people that my colleagues or friends or people around the country that I dialogue with regularly. This has come on our radars. I
Yeah.
don't I don't know. I would have to say that I don't think it's quite there in the general population, but I think that more and more providers, whether or not they're actually practicing it, are realizing that people are more interested in a holistic approach to their health, and whether or not it's something they're trained in, or they have the time to provide, or they have the support to provide. I do think there has been a shift in people asking more questions when they go to their providers, or seeking out people that are more inclined to look at a broader picture, or do a little bit more digging into issues. And I think that really actually started in the last several years, when people started taking more charge of their health, especially during COVID. So it seems, at least, and maybe I'm just in this little bubble of people that are very interested in getting to the root cause of what's going on. But it seems to me, just from speaking to colleagues across the country and just how their practices are growing, that people are seeking this out. And whether or not providers are able to give it to them, I think it's really, I'm seeing more and more in my groups, specialists that were kind of taught in a traditional model, that are now seeking to expand their own training and their own treatment into a more comprehensive investigative approach or treatment approach.
Gotcha. Yeah, yeah. So let me ask you this. If I'm a person who is feeling, I've got all different kinds of symptoms going on, right? Some of the symptoms that you've described a little bit, and my doctor is, my GP, maybe my general practitioner, my family physician is telling me, yes, take this medication and it's going to be, this is what we can do here. And that's about it. And I'm feeling like they're kind of one-minded on the physical side of things, right? Um, Maybe what I'm hearing from you is it's a little bit on the patient to seek out some folks who have a wider berth of training as far as some functional health, some more of a holistic approach to things. Do you think
I
that's
would say yes, in the sense
uh,
that I believe that a lot of general practitioners aren't trained, if you will. A lot of them have great training, but it's kind of a traditional model of training. And all the individuals I'm coming across that are expanding their practice into more an integrative and functional medicine are having to seek that extra education outside of what they get either in graduate school or medical school or whatever schooling they've undertaken initially. This is extra study outside of that, going to conferences, doing certification programs, and oftentimes your traditional primary care, they're working within the insurance system framework. And unfortunately, that is also puts constraints on what they are able to provide as far as treatment for their patients. A lot of them are also in big health systems, and sometimes providers' hands are tied by what is expected of them within the system, keeping to short appointment times, maybe not doing as big of workups on patients or getting as many labs because it may or may not be covered by insurance, and then the company loses money. So unfortunately, there is a business aspect, there is a monetary aspect of this, but there is also just a training aspect and an interest. I feel like digging deeper, it takes time and it takes establishing more of a personal relationship with your patients. And not everybody is interested in spending that time. A lot of people are just want to be very good at a very narrow um, field, and they're okay with that, and maybe they'll seek some extra training in that area. But oftentimes, yes, you need to go outside of the traditional system. Unfortunately, still, it's very our current medical system is just still very much disease focused. So waiting until people are sick or waiting till somebody has symptoms to treat them. And unfortunately, sometimes that's not the best approach, right? Sometimes that's even too late for people. So until we start to adopt more of a preventative model of care or preventative framework for insurance-based care, I think it's just going to be hard for people in general to hope that their general practitioners can do it. There are some out there, and there are a lot of really great, but again, it also requires extra time and study and education.
yeah. Yeah, I get that. And I appreciate that. I appreciate all of that. You sharing all of that around kind of the state of healthcare in our country right now. Yeah.
I mean, obviously, it can vary from place to place and organization to organization and provider to provider. But in speaking in generalities or with in broad generalities, I guess it's very difficult for people still to get integrative and functional preventative care. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
in the yeah.
I get that. I get that. And I think that's why I really wanted to talk to you on this show for sure and let people know that yeah, you're out there and there are others like you out there. And yeah. So I'm honored again to have met you as well. So well, if you wouldn't mind, let's shift a little bit. There's something that you had said one of the times that we've chatted. And this probably isn't going to be a direct quote, but I want to ask a little bit about this. And something that you had said was something like, you can't tell people to change their thoughts when their body is in fight or flight mode. This is talking a little bit more to the link between maybe trauma and its impact on our physical health. Yeah.
So I think a lot of people they they feel that something's going on. They're having anxiety, depression, they've suffered some trauma, either a significant single PTS, event with PTSD or chronic abuse or whatever you want to classify it as. And people tell them, well, you just need to go get therapy, or it's in your head, or you need to do X, Y, or Z. And for anybody that's studied a little bit about psychology or any kind of health related issues surrounding mental health and physical health, there's something called Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And the basic premise is that there's a pyramid of personal growth that occurs, it was kind of like the food pyramid, if you will, the things that you need, nice to have and need to have. And the very bottom is kind of your basic food, water, shelter, warmth. And then the next level is safety, security. And then the next level is relationships and emotional connections. It also goes all the way up to self-actualization. And the idea is that if you want people to change their behaviors, whether it be mental or physical, they have to have their basic needs being met first, and they can't be in just survival mode. And often we're asking people to do things to make these big changes in their life or to make big leaps in the world of mental health treatment when we haven't really established a solid foundation that's functioning well. And so I use the Maslow's hierarchy as an example, food, water, shelter, warmth. But it's the same idea applies to people that are potentially in a chronic state of fight or flight or emotional dysregulation. You can't send somebody to a therapy session or tell them they're going to need to make big diet changes or they're going to have to start exercising every day if they can't even emotionally regulate, like showering every day if they're so depressed, or they've lost their job, or there's no income, or you name it. If there's certain things that have to be done in order to expect people to perform higher level functioning or executive functioning. And so that basically comes down to why the physical analysis aspect is important. If you have people that have cortisol dysregulation because they're not sleeping, or they're in a relationship where it's dangerous, or they're scared all the time, or they have well, let me move on. But my point being is that if you have thyroid dysfunction, if you have hormonal imbalances, and you're telling somebody, well, I mean, I think you're just depressed, you need to go to therapy, but their progesterone is out of balance and their estrogen is going crazy, or they don't have any at all, and their testosterone is gone off the charts, you're asking people to go and do therapy and change lives and change their life, or adopt this whole exercise routine, when honestly, on a physical biochemical level, they may not be able to even they're not able to physically meet that need for their own body.
Mm-hmm.
So then we can't expect them to adopt all these higher level aspects of functioning, or we can't expect them to work through this trauma, or really be able to do cognitive behavioral therapy for anxiety or depression or negative thoughts, because they aren't foundationally or physically healthy enough to be able to then take on these more challenging tasks.
Yeah. Oh, I love the way you laid that out. It's so beautiful. And you're right. It's very obvious now, having heard what you just said, that the siloing that has happened in years past and up to today in medicine, it can't work. It doesn't work because of that reason, right? Hormones, it sounds like, and other chemicals in our bodies has a direct impact on our ability to function cognitively and do the kind of work that a therapist might ask a person to do. Yeah. And so
Yeah, I
go.
mean, yeah. Well, for example, say I see men often that come into the clinic, and testosterone is a very important part of men's sense of overall just well-being. It's that je ne sais quoi that you see men that have very low testosterone, and then you improve their testosterone levels and they come back and they're more animated and they're happy and they seem to have more vibrance. But oftentimes I talk to them and they're like, I mean, no, I don't know, I feel okay, but they've lost some motivation and they don't really want to exercise, and they're maybe having some relationship challenges at home, or they've lost interest in their business, or they just feel maybe a little depressed. And people are saying, well, maybe you should go to relationship counseling, or you just need to get out and exercise more. The problem is that they're literally missing part of their biochemical motivation, if you will, to be able to do that, to keep on muscle mass, to actually have the physical energy to go do that, to have the mental health capacity to engage in meaningful conversations about any relationship struggles. And I'm not saying there aren't external factors, but to be able to even address any of the external factors, you really have to first solidify or optimize all of the internal processes. And then you're going to be much more successful in the long term
Yeah.
with any of the external issues that might be going on, especially
Makes
from a mental health perspective.
Yeah, yeah, that makes so much sense. And I mean, well-meaning advice, maybe you should go talk to someone if you're depressed, like, right? But so let's talk about that for people who have been struggling, anxiety, depression, things like that. And maybe they've been in therapy for a while and they're still just like, what the heck, man? What would you suggest for someone like that? Like, what's a good first step or maybe another thing to try? What would you say?
Well, I'm honestly, if people are in therapy and they're having mental health issues, I would not encourage them to stop therapy. I feel like this is a multidisciplinary approach to treating certain issues. However, I would often question, have you had just a basic health checkup, or have you had anybody sit down and discuss with you, how is your sleep? What is your diet like? Have you had any blood work done? Are you suffering from thyroid dysfunction or anemia? Or yes, are your sex hormones all, tanked or off the charts or imbalanced? Those are all very important. What does your cortisol level look like? Because that can affect sleep, which can affect anxiety and depression. Again, everything affects everything in the body. And so just making sure that there are no significant organic, hormonal, dietary deficiencies, even getting a lot of serotonin is made in the gut, and serotonin deficiency is thought to be a very big contributor to anxiety. And so, and depression likely as well. So making sure that people's gut health is checked and functioning well, and they're eating well. And there's multiple aspects. It all though comes back to all the things that I think that people used to do in the world and that we kind of lost sight of because we're always digging for something more. We're making things more complex than we need to be, but it really comes down to like, how's your diet? How's your exercise? How's your sleep? How's your health?
Yeah,
Right? I
yeah,
think that is really just a huge, um, those four things are very big factors. And fortunately, in this day and age, we're actually able to get lab tests to check for nutritional deficiencies, hormonal deficiencies, or anything more serious too. I mean, that obviously goes without saying is that you want to rule out any other major medical disease processes as well.
yeah. So you're looking at let's get a general health checkup. Let's maybe track some sleep and some what are you eating over a period of time and just see where we're at to start with. And that I don't know, would you think that is some culprits are found with that
I
track?
mean, I would say, unfortunately, our food supply chain, we have a lot of chemicals in our food, pesticides. We don't have unfortunately, the best food supply. And I think that's a big culprit. I think that is much more of a culprit than people realize. Again, if we take it back to how people used to think about life and health, you are what you eat is very, very true. And I think even more so now. And so being mindful of what you're putting in your body is so incredibly important because I don't think people realize how sugars and food dyes and chemicals and the pesticides and glyphosate and even gluten now, unfortunately, or at least here in the US, a lot of our foods are processed and how that actually does affect your mental and physical health for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't even one of those words you just said I've never heard before. And so yeah, we've got these things in our
Yeah.
food that oh my gosh, what am I putting in my body? I'm wondering, Emily, if you would be willing to just give some like basic 101 food stuff. People living in the world that we live in, how can I avoid that word that you said that I don't know and other things in our food supply?
I mean, well, I'm not a caveat, I'm not a dietitian and
Yeah.
I'm not a very good cook. So, but I can give you some basic things that I tell my patients.
Sure.
Seed oils. Avoiding seed oils are really important because of how they're made and then what happens to them under high heat. And they're oxidative, they're very stressful on the body. Avoiding sugars, simple sugars, refined sugars, added sugars, corn syrup, all of that. I mean, natural sugars and berries and fruits is much better than sugar is very inflammatory. And the new word that everybody that we use is inflammaging. And sugar is a big culprit in inflammation, which is probably the biggest culprit in aging and rapid aging and chronic disease. The other thing that often, at least in this country, it's gluten, and it may or may not actually be the gluten. I think it is a little bit of genetically modified gluten, but then I believe it's sprayed with glyphosate, which is a pesticide, or maybe it's incorporated into it. This I'm not, don't hold me to this.
Mhm.
But a lot of people cannot digest it well or do not tolerate it, or they actually make antibodies against it. And it's actually very harmful to the thyroid gland. So we get a lot of dysfunction from gluten, which also causes, it can cause localized inflammation in the gut, which then is a chain reaction of all other sorts of bad things, malabsorption of other nutrients, leaky gut, joint pain. Then you could, but if you imagine that you're having issues in the gut or issues in the joints, well, you know, that obviously affects the brain too. And how does it manifest itself? Potentially in anxiety, depression, insomnia, mood instability, you name it. Everything affects everything. And so avoiding, I would say alcohol. People always try and cite studies that say, oh, you know, a glass of red wine here or 2 glasses a day, or, you know, I'm not a binge drinker if I only have 1 glass a day. And I say, I don't really think there is any amount of alcohol that is actually good for you. So if you like to drink alcohol, I tell my patients, drink, you know, you're an adult, you make those decisions. Yes, there are things in red wine that are good, like resveratrol, but you can get that without the alcohol component. But I really don't think that there's any amount of alcohol that's good for you. And so realistically speaking, you know, if you want to drink it, but let's not pretend that it's
Take
probably
it.
healthy for you. Um,
Yeah.
what else? I think trying to eat as many whole foods as possible, steaming your vegetables, avoiding cooking things at really high heat. I think that if you can get locally grown, I mean, and this gets tricky and it's obviously not financially or even geographically feasible for some people, but if you can get locally grown produce, the sooner you can eat something that's come out of the ground, the more likely it is to retain its nutrients. If you know where it's grown or how it's raised, then you're more likely to know what's been put in it. I know a lot of people in this area, um, they get they get eggs from local chickens, or will buy part of a cow and have a freezer and will deep freeze and use that meat over the course of a year or 6 months. And so those are things you can try and do, is control where your food is coming from or where it's sourced. But otherwise, if you can just try and eat the perimeter of the store, I guess would be another. Fruits, vegetables, some whole grains are okay. Eating more, trying to eat a more balanced diet. Butter is good. I would say cooking with butter, ghee, avocado, coconut, and olive, coconut, and avocado oils. Those are all good oils that you can cook with, and they're also good, have good omegas in them. So those are kind of those are very general. But again, I'm not a dietitian, and you can go down rabbit holes of certain kinds of diets, but just looking for, you can always go online and Google anti-inflammatory foods, foods to avoid. But everybody's very different. So if people really want to know what foods are good for them, they will have to just try foods and see how they feel, or they can do food allergy testing but that's a whole different topic for conversation.
Yeah, yeah. No, I appreciate that. I had heard the eat the perimeter thing, and I thought, oh, that's easy enough for me to remember, right? So avoiding the boxed and higher processed things in the center of a store, and typically the whole foods are found on the like outside perimeter of that. Yeah, I like that. That's easy for me.
I mean, in most stores. I know
Yeah.
there's one grocery store here where everything's in the center, so just disregard if you shop at Rayleigh's.
Right. Yeah, but the idea is more whole foods, less processed. So yeah,
Yeah.
easier it is to cook. Unfortunate. No, I'm just kidding. But all right. Well, gosh, thank you for all of that. I know I threw that kind of diet question at you, but I do, it's really helpful for those of us who, we hear things in social media and on the news or whatever about, here's this medication that can help with this and that, when in reality, if I can eat healthier and avoid needing more medications, then I'd much rather go that route and spend my money there. What is that phrase? You either if you don't take, oh my goodness, I'm gonna mess it up. If you don't pay for good health, you'll pay for bad health later, something like that. I don't know, but yeah. So,
Yep.
yeah. Well, Emily, I love hearing stories, specifically success stories. Do you have any stories you can share with us, people who have come to you highly dysregulated, either physically, emotionally, mentally, or all of it, who have been able to regulate their body, their health, their mind through some of these more natural means?
Um, I have a couple of good stories, or I have about two or three that I always use because I really like them. And actually, the one I'm going to tell you was this gentleman, and he actually just reached out to me the other day. I hadn't heard from him in a couple years, and it's so kind of interesting. But this was also a little bit how I got started in down this journey a little bit more. I was working for a psychiatrist part-time, helping do medication management for patients. I was also working in the ER as well as a family medicine center. And basically the psychiatrist, he was never there. I saw all of his patients. So I basically had free reign of the office. And I decided that I had some patients that were younger, and I was realizing, there are patients on all these medications, and I just don't know. I don't feel like anybody's really checking them from a health perspective. And I got to know a lot of these patients really well over the 2 years. And I had this one gentleman, and he was younger. I think at the time he was maybe 33. He was unemployed, and he basically only left his apartment to come and see me once every 2 weeks or once a month for a checkup. He wasn't doing well. He was on 5 different medications for anxiety and depression, psychiatric medications. He was overweight. He wasn't exercising. Nicest person in the world. And I asked him, I said, hey, do you see a doctor, anybody check on your health? And he said, no. And I said, would you be willing to let me do a little bit more investigating into what might be going on with you? And he said, sure. He was open to it. He really didn't like being on these medications. He wasn't somebody that was reveling and just sitting home and being sick. He was really down. And I think that was contributing to the depression, was that he just couldn't get out of this hole. So I decided I was going to check some blood work on him. And lo and behold, he's 33, and he came back, and his testosterone level was like 150. And to put this in context for people that don't know, they say a normal range of testosterone for men is from like 3 to 900, but most men feel good up around 9 to 1200, 8 to 1200, I have found. So he's very low. And I mean, he's actually clinically by insurance standards considered low. So and I believe he had a couple other, his thyroid wasn't functioning well, which, chicken and egg, probably that was contributing to his low testosterone. He wasn't sleeping well. His cortisol was really high in the evening. He had all these endocrine hormone imbalances. He wasn't sick. Like he didn't have diabetes, but he was on that path of insulin resistance. He didn't have any other major medical issues really. But we looked at his labs and I'm like, oh my gosh. And so I said, hey, what do you think about trying to treat some of this stuff to see if we can help get you off of some of these medications? And he's like, great. So we start working on thyroid dysfunction, and he goes on testosterone, and we start correcting nutrient imbalances. We have to make sure he's sleeping well. And a year later, he went from never leaving his house except once a month to come and see me. He got a job. He moved across the country. He got a significant other, and he started working in a business, which was a client-facing like marketing job, which before he wouldn't even leave his house. And he was down to 2 medications. So yeah, so that was really great. And it was really nice to know that, wow, like really looking at the body does affect the mind, and optimizing some of this really can make a difference. So,
Yeah.
I mean, that was a really nice success story, to the point where my patient actually just got up and left me. No, it was good. It was really nice. And he just reached out to me recently to tell me how well he's doing.
Oh,
Uh,
I
yeah, so
love
that was really nice. So, and I've had a couple success stories too with women that had anxiety and depression. They both thought they were um, menopausal, perimenopausal at about age 39. They were both on a couple psychiatric medications, and I checked their hormones. They both had really bad thyroid dysfunction. We corrected that. One came completely off of medications and got pregnant, and she thought that she was never going to get pregnant. The other one came off one of her. She did have some bipolar issues, and she also got pregnant. And they both thought that they weren't ever going to be able to have kids. So
it.
that was really kind of cool too, to be able to improve physical and mental health for both of them.
Yeah. Oh, I
Yeah.
love that. I love,
Yes.
no wonder you do what you do, right? Because
Well,
to
that was kind of the foray. It's nice to have those stories, and those are kind of the um, kind of kept me motivated to keep doing that. Obviously, that was kind of early in my journey, and I had to keep perfecting what I'm doing and keep learning more and integrating it more. But it was actually very nice to be able to help people from both a mental health and physical health perspective.
yeah. Yeah. No, I love that. And I can see how that led to a transition. If some experiences like that would lead to the transition that
Yeah,
you've made in your practice, in your life. So yeah.
yeah.
Well, I will say in a minute, I'm going to um, open it up for questions for those who are watching this evening. If you have general health or wellness questions for Emily, please do put those questions in the question box. If you can find that on your screen, it's at the bottom of the screen there. There's a little question mark in there. So if you can put your questions there for Emily. And while we're waiting for those questions, Emily, maybe if we can let folks know, I've just got some questions about working with you in particular. Does a person need to be in the state of Nevada to work with you or to come? Yeah.
So technically, yes, they need to be have established care with me in person here in Nevada. I'm only licensed in Nevada right now. However, there is a provision in some of the telemedicine that if somebody has established in-person care with me here, I can continue to provide them with telehealth services for a certain amount of time if they've moved away, 3 to 6 months, up to a year for them to establish with somebody else, or if they are just happen to be traveling for a few months or for a few weeks, I can see them remotely as long as they maintain their Nevada residence.
Gotcha.
So the idea is that there's not a lapse in care while somebody's either looking for care where they have moved locations, or if they're going to be coming back and continue to have established care with me. But if, say, since we're close to the California border, I cannot do telemedicine visits into California with somebody who hasn't come to see me in person
I
first.
gotcha. I gotcha. Yeah. Okay. And we do have folks watching from across the country. So if they're in a whole other part of the country or even just in California, it looks like, yeah. Can we maybe give those folks, maybe a little advice on what to look for, what to ask when looking for someone like yourself in their area?
I think my best advice would be to look for somebody who says they practice integrative or functional healthcare. Could be a nurse practitioner, an MD, a DO, or it's somebody that just practices functional medicine. There are naturopathic physicians or naturopathic providers that do that, some chiropractors. My recommendation would be, if they have a website, look at the services they offer, and then call and speak to them about their experience in treating individuals. And if you have specific issues that you're wanting to deal with, while they may not be able to give you advice medically at that time, it's always helpful to speak to them so you understand their philosophy on treatment and how much experience they have in doing what you're doing. I have actually a pretty big network of people across the country of providers that do specifically what I do, or at least I know people that I can ask, hey, do you know somebody in this area that I can connect you with? Um, yeah, basically just the best thing you can do though is try and have a conversation with the person that you're interested in, because it may take a little bit to find somebody that you click with or that seems experienced in what you're doing. I would say make sure that you're as specific as possible with what you're looking for. There are some people that are very niche specific, like I do mostly just hormones and endocrinology. I don't dive deep into gut health. And so when people call and ask me that, I say, no, I don't do that, but I have two people that I generally refer people to do or refer people out for consultation. So
Gotcha. Okay. So I think the important takeaway there is that it is okay to ask a practitioner questions, and as many questions as you need to feel comfortable with that, rather than I'm just going to find somebody, on Google and schedule an appointment and go to that person.
yeah,
It's
and speak to them about their experience and treating
uh,
specifically the concerns that you have.
yeah. Great, great. And you mentioned gut health. We do have one question. How do you check and fix your gut health? And I know that's not one of your like deep dive areas, but how would you answer that question for folks?
There are multiple ways that you can do that. I think probably the best testing is both blood work and stool testing. Blood work will give you kind of an overview of how your body is reacting to um, the processes in your gut, for instance, food sensitivities or allergies that are causing your body to make antibodies systemically. Meaning, are you having issues processing things in your gut that are affecting your whole body versus stool testing can help you see what's going on locally in the gut, what kind of bacteria you have, what you might be lacking, if you have an overgrowth of something. They can also do some food sensitivity testing, I think, from that. Again, this isn't my area of expertise, but there are multiple different tests. There are actually a lot of tests. And so it may just be provider dependent what people choose and what their experience level is. My recommendation, though, is finding somebody that's very well versed in it. It's very nuanced. The order in which you correct things, fix things, replace things, take away, eliminate things can be very important into establishing good gut health. And the reports you get are pages and pages long, and they're very detailed. And it's basically a whole nother specialty or subspecialty of functional medicine that I think is important to make sure the person that you're talking to has done that enough before, because like I said, it can be very nuanced. I mean, it might it may not be difficult for some people, but for other people, it can be very challenging because they have a lot going on.
Yeah. So if I'm somebody who just, I mean, I don't even know if I'm just feeling bloated after I eat or something like that, like I'm just not sure if there's something wrong with my gut because there's so much talk about that, right? But asking someone like yourself, like, should I look into this more is probably maybe a good place to start,
Oh,
would
of
you say?
course. You can ask. And I mean, I can even give some very, high level, not very specific suggestions, but things like that. For instance, your example, I would probably say to you, I think maybe what would be really helpful is for you to keep a food diary and then for the next few weeks, see if you detect a pattern in what's causing your symptoms. Because if you can take that to somebody and say, hey, I've noticed X, Y, or Z, or I have no idea, it seems to be all over the place, that's also helpful. The more data that you can provide that can help drill down on the issue is very helpful. And there's some things you can do at home, food elimination challenges, and re-implementing things one at a time to see what might be the culprit. There are some common things that you can eliminate and add back in, such as cow's milk, dairy, gluten, things like that. And if you've exhausted all of those options and you're still having specific GI issues, then sure, you can talk to somebody about that. I would also say that there are kind of two found I discuss health being kind of two foundations, your gut health and your hormonal health. Those are kind of the foundational systems of the body because they have far-reaching consequences for being imbalanced. And so, sometimes you will talk to me and I will say, well, I think you probably need to optimize both or work on both. And so you sometimes need to pick one or the other to start with. If you're having actual gastrointestinal symptoms, that is probably a place to start because you may be surprised that if you do have something going on in there, some imbalance or abnormality, and you fix that, then the downstream effects might be that you correct some other issues that you have going on health wise, like joint pain or foggy thinking or sleep disturbance. So there's really, again, everything affects everything. So, but some people want to dive in and do everything at once. And I say maybe it's probably good to pick one system or one thing at a time to work on. That way, you know what's really helping and what effect it's having on the rest of the body.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Wow. I really appreciate that, Emily. Appreciate. Yeah. Love the approach and the food diary for sure. Right. Coming in with symptoms and just saying, yeah, I don't know. I can't remember what I ate for breakfast. What? Right. That's got to be frustrating as a provider, but yeah. So I love that. Okay. So let's give folks who are watching or listening, who are curious about exploring functional medicine, how can they get started with you? What's the best way to contact you? And tell us that.
Well, please check out the website, first of all, just to see a little bit of what we offer. It's www.restorative.healthnv.com. It's a mouthful. I can repeat that at the end for everybody. I've tried to include a lot of information on the website, not too much, but enough about our services. That way you can just review over and over and look at all the different things we provide. We do some regenerative procedures as well that tie in with women's health. And we also do peptide therapy, which is a little bit of, I would say, kind of next level optimization for some health issues, including growth hormone or injury recovery, repair. So I don't want to get into the weeds with that. And I'm happy to talk to anybody. I would say check it out. And then if you have more questions, our phone number's on the website, but I'll give it to you. It's 775-347-3737. And I have a great assistant, Jill, and she can help get you scheduled. And like I mentioned earlier, we can just have a discovery call. You can tell me what's going on or what questions you have, or if I'm not able to be a provider for you, though, I'm still happy to either try and connect you with somebody in my referral network or give you some guidance on what next steps would be or the kind of provider I would look for or the kind of services I would start with. And then, yeah, we go from there.
Awesome. That's super generous to offer that, Emily, and I really appreciate that. And some of our listeners do too. Thank you for the practical tips and advice and all of the knowledge that you have bestowed. That's awesome. So yeah, thank you for that. I will put your contact information, your website, your phone number in the show notes as well. So just know that. And yeah, Emily, thank you so much. I really am very honored to have you. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
All right. You're great, Emily. Thank you. That's another.
That's for my sister. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for coming and for the questions. And yeah, let's optimize our health for sure. Right.
And this is being recorded. So if you all think of you have anybody else that might benefit or please pass this recording along. I think they can do that. I don't.
Yep, they can. So anyone who registered for this, and anyone on my contact list and yours as well can have a link to the recording as soon as we have it ready and on the website. So yeah. All right. You're great, Emily. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Emily. Appreciate you. And thank you everyone for attending.